am going to record this session, and I've started that recording now since everyone was able to make the call. And we'll go ahead and get started. And just to be sure, can everyone see the first slide on the screen? It says Washington State Gear Up RFP Review Process, Instructional Webinar. Is there anyone who cannot see that? Okay. All right. Well, now it's not working. There we go. So first off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for volunteering their time for this project. It is quite an undertaking. As I saw the piles of paper, I was a little intimidated, I have to say. But then as I looked at it, like, oh yeah, about half of that paper is our instructions, because we tried to give so much information to them to help them do a high quality proposal. But it's still going to take a good chunk of your time, and thank you very much for volunteering. You should have received the RFP proposals in the mail by now. If you have not, please let me know immediately. Some of them are still on the table here for internal folks to pick up, but everyone else had their stuff mailed to them, FedEx, I believe, on Friday, so it should have arrived. In total, we received 33 proposals from 29 school districts. The proposals provide services to about 4,300 students, and they've requested about $2.8 million. However, there are a few schools that I think could be considered in a different model, and so I can see that number increasing. We anticipate asking for $3.5 million from the Department of Ed, and we'll have our $1 million from state funding, we expect anyway. And we need to serve at least 4,500 students, we think, in order to be competitive in our ask. So we're just about there. I think we can look at what's been proposed and maybe make some adjustments in students served. But I want to stress that the most important thing is that we have quality programming. So if that means we serve fewer students from these proposals, that's the best choice. So we're still looking for quality proposals. Each proposal will be read by 3 to 4 people, and we did that we created these review teams, I think, with some diverse representation of experience and background, knowledge of Gear Up, and so they seem like a really good balance. Also with people who have, I just realized Rochelle's not on. People who have experience reading proposals, and some people for whom this is a brand new activity. So especially to those of you that haven't done this before, thank you, and appreciate you wanting to venture out and try something new. We will be ranking the proposals rather than scoring them when we get together in the review team meeting. So you don't need to worry about whether or not your scores are similar to others, because in the end we will rank them. So for example, I'm a really tough scorer, and I tend to score lower than most people on most review teams most of the time. But then when you rank them, you know, my scores tend to be fairly similar to others. So we will use that same process in this decision making. I will not be scoring proposals. However, I will be reading all of them so that I'm familiar with what's been proposed, but the scoring will be left up to the review team. Then when it comes time to make decisions, the review team is making a recommendation, but the decisions will be made by staff because there are other considerations that we might think about, including past performance, geographical distribution, and available funding. Hi, Stephanie and Tracy. Thanks for joining us. We've just gotten in. You missed one slide, so I'll just go back to that quickly. We received 33 proposals from 29 school districts requesting about $2.8 million for 4,300 students. That is a little bit less than I'd really hoped for, but I think it's manageable and gives us a good pool for consideration. So prior to starting the review process, I suggest that you review the application packet and the full RFP and scoring rubric, and that was sent to you in an email on Friday afternoon, just in case you haven't had a chance to look at that yet. So I suggest that you scan through that. The application packet is the same information that's in the full RFP, but it's what folks filled out, so it's a condensed version with less information. You might also think about reading 2 or 3 of the proposals through without scoring them at all, just to get comfortable with the format of the proposals and what they kind of look like. It might be helpful. Also, the applications, especially if you have your hard copies, look really gigantic, but they include a lot of instructions. So about half of the content is actually instructions and information for the applicants to review. The review teams, for the most part, have been assigned similarly sized schools, and so you'll be really comparing and reviewing schools that kind of look alike from the outside, although, as you'll find, their proposed activities may vary greatly. So when you're reviewing, you should think about how does this proposal compare to the others, so that your scoring is consistent across those applications. And that's why, again, I suggest that you go through a few without scoring to kind of see how that flows. You may want to review and take notes for all the proposals and then go back and assign scores. Sometimes that's easier. Sometimes I also will review and score a few, and then I go back and make adjustments. So the important thing is to develop a process that works for you and makes sense to you, so that in the end you feel good about the scores that you've given and that they're consistent across the group that you've reviewed. Please notice that there are a few items that aren't scored. They're just for information purposes only, and you should not consider them in your ranking of proposals at all. And those include the sheet of baseline data. We just wanted that for information purposes to find out where they are now. In GEAR Up, we really look at continuous improvement. And so we want to see that wherever they are now, we get better data at the end. Also, sometimes they don't even collect data that we'd be looking at, so that's good for us to know. But no score, and it shouldn't impact anything in your ratings. The students to be served, we have 2 different models, and you won't notice this because you were given just a single model to score, but we have a cohort model and a priority model. Team 4 is reviewing all of the priority model applications. Teams 1, 2, and 3 are reviewing the cohort model applications. And so you'll see how many students they expect to serve. That's based on their student population, so no one is taking students out that wouldn't be eligible, that would be eligible, I'm sorry. So we don't need to score that. And then there's a rating scale, which is included as part 1 of the self-assessment. And again, that's part of that continuous improvement philosophy, and we don't want to score them. Just where they are is where they are, and we're looking for growth and improvement over time. The really important piece is that if you do deduct points, that you explain it in the comment section, and that's really important so that we're consistent when we come in. So that's one of the things we'll look at when we have our review team meeting is, are the comments consistent? Did we all identify the things that were missing or needed additional clarification? And then, of course, positive comments are appreciated because that's good feedback to give to schools also. I'm going to just pause there. Does anyone have any questions at this time? Okay, and I know for those that joined late, I know it says that I'm Sarah Weiss, but this is in fact Marcy Sample. All right, the glitches. You know, we tried really hard to make a good process, but as I was reviewing over the weekend, I noticed some things didn't go quite as well as we'd hoped. So, oops, hang on. How do I get back there? Something just happened to my slide. I lost my mouse. There we go. So one of the first things that you'll probably notice are some formatting nightmares. We tried to stress don't change the format, keep it as is, and yet people did some wonky things with the formatting, everything from changing the direction of the papers from portrait to landscape to reformatting tables, and some of them are bold and underlined all the way through. It's just, there are lots of crazy things in the formatting. So that's why we decided to send you both the hard copy and give you access via Dropbox to the electronic copy, just so you have something that you can use. We did, shred a lot. We went through a lot of paper to do that, but I felt like it was worth it. So please don't deduct any points for not following the formatting instructions, including, whether or not they double spaced or got the footer at the bottom. We'll worry about that later. We just really want you to focus on the content of what's been proposed. There was some confusion for folks in the requirement for position descriptions. So some people inserted them, I believe it was in section C of the proposal narrative, and others attached them at the end of the proposal, which was actually what I intended them to do. So whatever they did, it's acceptable as long as they followed the directions for submitting a position description. So it was supposed to be in district format, as if it was ready to be posted, and completely explains qualifications and roles and responsibilities. So as long as that's information and formatted is included, then it's acceptable and scoreable. If it's completely missing, you should definitely deduct points for that and note that in your comments. There was a page in the application called Certifications and Assurances. That's a signature page for the superintendent. Some of them put that into their electronic copy, and some of them sent it as a separate document, which was completely acceptable. So don't worry about whether or not it's there, and don't worry about scoring it or making any comments related to that. I've verified that we did receive all of them, and so everyone met that requirement. In the self-assessment tool, I wanted to help people in part 3 of that section have some examples of the kind of language that would get them higher scores. So I put an example in each one. What I noticed was some people left that example in, which included a budget amount, but it's not really included. They left it there as the example was intended. Other people deleted it completely, and then some people left it in and put it into their math calculation and may or may not have changed the figures. So you can usually tell if it's an example because it doesn't show that it's included in the math calculation, but sometimes it's there and included. So that's a clarification that I will do. You don't need to worry about that. You could certainly make a comment about it so we identify those, but I think I will catch those and take care of that, but it was just kind of a funny thing that happened. I'm not sure what was intended in some cases. And then, as I just hinted, I will do all the math related to the calculations. So you don't need to make sure the numbers add up correctly. I actually have done that and found a couple of errors. So I will pay attention to whether or not the math works and whether or not they asked for the right amount of money. You don't need to do that part, but I want you to pay attention to, are the costs reasonable? Do they align with what they've proposed? Does it make sense? Are they funding what they said they would do? Those kinds of things. There were a few schools that are definitely over budget, over what they would be allowed, and then we have some schools that are under budget, and some schools I can't quite figure out why they asked for the amount they asked for. So I will take care of all of those issues. A few notes on some specific proposals. The Spokane School District submitted 6 separate proposals. They're all different and should be considered separately. I believe those are all Review Team 3 proposals, plus you have one extra from West Valley, from West Valley. So they're all Spokane area, but 6 of them are specifically Spokane School District. So score them separately. You may see some similarities, but as I glanced through them, they're actually quite different from school to school. Then we have several districts, Bethel, Vancouver, Everett, Federal Way, who all submitted a single proposal to provide services at multiple schools, usually 2, but sometimes 3. Each of those should be considered as a single proposal. So the proposal that Bethel has, for example, that is one proposal. You're not going to separate out scores based on schools, but look at the whole proposal. I'm going to pause just for a minute. Are there any questions about what I've covered so far? And you should all be able to, well, some of you look like you have phone access and some of you don't, so you can type in your question in the chat bar if you'd like.
I have a question.
Okay, Beth has a question.
I know you're probably going to touch on budget, but I was looking through some of the proposals just to familiarize myself with what to expect, and I saw some things around in the narrative around match that might not be acceptable. I wasn't planning on reducing the award, but making that a comment to follow up on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
sounds great, yes. And so the instruction they were given about match, so match means that the schools are required to contribute some funds or time and effort or donations to the project, and the requirement will be 75% of their request. I really stressed in the bidders workshops that I don't want them to worry too much about match now, because we'll provide a lot of training around that once we have the contracts in place. But the narrative does ask them, like, how are you going to come up with it? And so because they haven't had that training yet, it's very likely that they could propose things that are not allowable. So again, that's something that we would negotiate and train and work through with them, so they shouldn't have anything deducted. But if you suspect something might not be allowable, it's completely acceptable to make a comment about that.
Yeah, it was AmeriCorps.
Oh, AmeriCorps match, yeah, and AmeriCorps cannot be as match because it's another federal source. Mm-hmm. Thanks. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see, it looks like I put this in there twice. The first item about the example, sorry about that. I think I covered all of that already. So now you grab a cup of coffee, you sit down and get comfortable and read and review and score. And I will need to have your score sheets back by Friday, March 17th. That gives you just about 2 weeks to review. If you are going to score on paper or hard copy, you'll need to mail them to me. If you do them electronically, you can email those to me, or you can save them in the Dropbox. But just make sure you identify it as your score sheet. So it would say something like Vancouver, Roseanne, London, something like that. Identify it. Then on Friday, March 24th, we will have our review team meeting. So please notice that these are not in the order of review team. It doesn't go 1 to 4 through the day. We go 3, 4, then 1, 2 in the afternoon. And if you can't attend in person, you can call in during that time. I just need to know so I can give you an access number. Or if you can't even call in, just let me know and we'll work out another arrangement so I can talk to you about your score sheets. At the review team meetings, we'll discuss the proposals, kind of the highlights and the lowlights that you identified. We will rank them and come up with a ranking across all team members, clarify any issues that we need to follow up on. For example, the item that Beth just mentioned, if you think there's something that's not allowable, then that would we'd identify that for me to follow up and just address any concerns that we might have in funding any of the proposals. So with that, that's the quick down and dirty version of how to review the RFPs. And if you have any questions at any time in this process, please feel free to call me or email me. You have both my office number and my cell number there. I don't widely distribute my cell number, but in this case, I'm going to be out of the office a couple of days both weeks. So feel free to use that number. And then if you're going to mail the score sheets back, you can mail them to my attention. But again, if you do them electronically, you can put those on the Dropbox or email them to me. So that felt like it went very quickly. I'll just pause again to see if anyone has any questions.
We have like what
Beth is asking me to just clarify the scoring rubric a little bit. So in the scoring rubric, for each item, for each section, we have the look-fors. So we have the rating scale of does not meet expectations up to exceeds expectations. That will help you score. And then the look-fors. So the look-fors are the things that we want you to identify. If all of those things are present and they've done an excellent job explaining them, then we feel that would be an exceeds expectations score. If, you know, they're there, but they kind of did the minimum to get them there, we would consider that meet expectations. Satisfactory might mean, well, they hit most of them and you get the idea what they're doing, but there's maybe not enough detail. That would be satisfactory. And then anything less than that just does not meet expectations. And then for each section, there's a point value. So 20 points for the self-assessment. Exceeds expectations is pretty perfect and outstanding, would get 20 points. And then you deduct as you go down the scale based on that number of points. So really look at the look-fors because those are the things that make the best proposals. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you know how to reach me if something does come up. And happy reading.
Thank you.